There are two Space Marines who have become quite infamous within the Warhammer 40k community. The first, you all know, Tyberos the Red Wake, the chapter master of the Custoidans, who is supposedly so massive he's almost the size of a Primarch. We've already judged him and slotted him into a cow's power pyramid. And the second is Asterion Moloc, the fearsome chapter master of the Minotaurs, who many fans believe could even defeat a Custoidan in single combat. The issue with Moloc is that he has some of the most absurd statements in 40k, but how much of that is actually backed up by established canon? Well folks, there's only one way to find out. So just like we did with Tyberos, in today's video I'm going to break down who Asterion Moloc is, his weapons, abilities, and his greatest feats before answering the question everyone wants to know. Where exactly does Moloc scale compared to the rest of the 40k universe? So, as always, let's dolphin dive straight into the cow hole. Say it with me, my beloved herd. It's time to power scale. So just like usual, who exactly is Asterion Moloc? Asterion Moloc, also known as the Bringer of Wrath, and the Brazen Warlord, is the current chapter master of the Minotaurs. He is cold, calculating, and a ruthless commander, who has an almost obsessive dedication to the Emperor's will. His chapter, the Minotaurs, have long served as the High Lords of Terra's lapdogs, being deployed to crush rebellious and renegade Space Marine chapters. Moloc is first mentioned in canon in the Badab War, where he quickly gained a reputation as a warrior without peer, as he would personally lead his Terminators into battle after battle. Honestly, the first time we ever see him in the text is one of the most badass passages I've ever read in my cow life. This is from the Imperial Armor, Volume 10, The Badab War, Part 2. Lord Asterion Moloc, the darkly famed master of the Minotaurs, hurled the members of the secondest ruling Strapi from the spire of its oratory cathedral. This he did after impaling the Astroclaw's chaplain Varna Sabin to the front of his personal Land Raider transport as an example to the traitors of the fate that awaited them. So yeah, it's no wonder that Asterion Moloc became a fan favorite. And part of that comes from his instantly recognizable appearance, while his cold, almost silent demeanor only adds to the mystery surrounding him. But beyond the myths and speculation, Moloc is renowned as both a master strategist and a peerless warrior, able to lead devastating campaigns just as effectively as he can carve through the enemy himself. But perhaps the best description of him comes directly from the Imperial Armor, Volume 10, The Badab War, Part 2. Where we get this description. The bloody-handed and paranoid master of the Minotaurs chapter. Lord Asterion Moloc revels in his dark reputation, and his name is a byword for slaughter and destruction, carried out in the Emperor's name on a score of worlds. The veteran of 100 battles, his body has been heavily rebuilt with cybernetic augments, and his sheer spite and malice is enough to allow him to shrug off wounds that would fell a lesser Space Marine. A brutal tactician, Lord Asterion Moloc takes pleasure in the utter destruction of his foes, and is most often found in battle at the head of his Terminators, slamming into the enemy line. He is also a diligent and disciplined logistician and strategist, and a master of siegecraft. Outside of battle, he can be found on his brazen throne at the center of the maze-like chambers of the heavy assault carrier Datalos Crata, surrounded by data feeds, tabulation servitors, and casualty reports, measuring the drops of blood spilt in quest of his chapter's strategic goals. Yeah, so Moloc is truly one intimidating fella. But here's something that completely blew my mind while researching this video. Just like I did with Tyberos, I went through and counted every major appearance Moloc has across established canon. And well, yeah, it blew my mind. He only appears in 3 canonical sources. Imperial Armor Volume 10, The Badab War, Part 2, Imperial Armor Volume 12, The Fall of Orpheus, and the book Watchers of the Throne, The Regent's Shadow. Now across these 3 books, Moloc is mentioned just 15 times in The Badab War Part 2, 39 times in The Fall of Orpheus, and 38 times in The Regent's Shadow. Which brings us to a grand total of, drumroll please, 92 mentions in all of canon.
You serious?
Yes, 92 times. That's insanely criminal when you think about how iconic Moloc has become. For comparison, Tyberos the Red Wake, the other chapter master whose reputation has come purely from the memes and online fandom, is only mentioned 94 times in all of canon. So despite being one of the most talked about chapter masters in Warhammer 40k lore, he is hardly mentioned across canon, and apparently has even less mentions than Tyberos himself. Outside of his surprisingly few appearances, one of the strangest things about Asterion Moloc is that apparently, according to Imperial Armor Volume 12, The Fall of Orpheus, he has supposedly been killed at least 6 different times over the last 5 centuries, only to later reappear alive. Combined with the extensive cybernetic reconstruction of his body, this has led to one of the wildest theories surrounding his character. This, coupled with the Minotaur's chapter's insularity and the very high level of cybernetic rebuild their master is known to have undergone, has led to the rather extreme supposition by some observers that Asterion Moloc has not been one space marine, but many down the centuries, each inheriting not only a name and panoply, but also, and somewhat blasphemously, an ingrammatically enforced personality and memories. So pretty much, there's a legitimate in-universe theory that Asterion Moloc isn't actually just one guy, but a succession of different chapter masters inheriting the same identity. There are even some wild theories that he's a custodian. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to be treating Moloc as just one very angry, one very murderous, and one very augmented space marine. So now that we know who Asterion Moloc is, let's get into what you really clicked on this video for. His weapons, his armor, his abilities, and of course, his greatest feats across Warhammer 40k. First off, Asterion Moloc is a genetically enhanced space marine, which means right out of the gate, he can move faster, lift more, react quicker, and withstand punishment that would absolutely obliterate a normal human. Even your average Astartes is already a superhuman monster by baseline standards, so Moloc starts from an incredibly high foundation, and that's even before we get into what makes him special. But what's even more impressive is that Moloc has not crossed the Rubicon Primaris, which means he is still a firstborn space marine. At least from what I can gather from established canon. So he lacks the physical enhancements that comes with becoming a Primaris Marine, which makes his later feats we're going to talk about even more insane. In addition to being a firstborn Marine, both the Imperial Armor Volume 10 and the Imperial Armor Volume 12 repeatedly state that Moloc has undergone extensive cybernetic reconstruction. His body has been heavily rebuilt with bionic augmentations, and in the world of Warhammer 40k, that's not necessarily a downgrade. Now, some of you might be thinking, what do you mean, Cal? When Darth Vader got cybernetics, he wasn't able to move like Anakin anymore, and he lost most of his potential. But cybernetics in Warhammer 40k work a whole lot differently. In many cases, bionic replacements are just as strong as enhanced flesh, and in some aspects, they're just simply better. Cybernetic limbs are often stronger and more durable than their biological counterparts, while bionic legs can increase speed and mobility, and cybernetic eyes can provide enhanced vision. And even neural implants can allow a Marine to react faster with their weapons than they could through their normal eyes. So for an Astartes, especially a chapter master, these augmentations would be crafted to an incredibly high standard. To add to that, there are some theories that some of Moloc's cybernetics could potentially be relic technology, dating back to the dark age of technology. But I will admit, there is no definitive evidence to confirm this. Still, it's safe to assume that his augmentations are among the finest available to the Imperium, further enhancing his already exceptional strength, speed, durability, and martial prowess. As for his war gear, well, let me just say Moloc also appears to have some really goddamn good equipment.
Behold, my stuff.
First, he wears Artificer Terminator armor, which according to Imperial Armor Volume 12, The Fall of Orpheus, Moloc's customary panoply of war is a highly modified Artificer suit of tactical dreadnought armor, considered to be based upon the Tyberos pattern Terminator suit design. The Tyberos itself is a relic design among its kind, developed in the latter stages of the Great Crusade, and is marked for being lighter and more streamlined in its construction without reduction in its phenomenal durability. So along with being cybernetically enhanced, Moloc is also equipped with some of the finest armor available in the Imperium. His Terminator plate provides the standard heavy protection expected from tactical dreadnought armor, utilizing layers of ceramite and adamantium. But the Tyberos pattern is specifically designed to maintain the durability of Terminator plate while offering increased mobility and agility. This essentially creates a terrifying combination: a heavily armored walking tank that can still move with the speed and precision expected from a normal Space Marine. In fact, we've seen examples throughout canon of just how durable Terminator armor can be. For example, Space Wolf Terminators have survived being stepped on by Warhound Titan, endured direct missile impacts, multiple bolt rounds, and even attacks from a Lehman Russ battle tank, while continuing to fight. So yeah, Moloc's armor is pretty good. But that is not all, folks. Further enhancing his defenses, Moloc also carries the Heraldic Storm Shield, which is another piece of war gear described in The Fall of Orpheus. Further improving his armor's already formidable defenses, Moloc carries as part of his war gear a Storm Shield, which generates a defensive energy field capable of annulling tremendous kinetic impacts and electromagnetic energy attacks. So this shield makes Moloc even harder to bring down, and we even see Moloc use it to block powerful energy attacks from Necron forces, including blows from Necron Praetorians and an Overlord, who I will admit does break it after several strikes. But it's still an impressive feat nonetheless, as that same Overlord was able to destroy a Dreadnought's arm with a single blow. Finally, Moloc's third piece of his arsenal is his Black Spear, which is his primary weapon when engaging enemies in close combat, which obviously is also included in The Fall of Orpheus, which describes it as a true deadly relic weapon of unknown provenance. The Black Spear is similar in some regards to the sacred arms of the Adeptus Custodes. The spear is a power weapon of remarkable potency, able in Moloc's hands to pierce even Terminator battleplate, and also incorporates a single-shot laser weapon, sufficiently potent enough to be used as an anti-tank weapon if needed.
What did he say?
So his third piece of war gear, the Black Spear, is also incredibly powerful, combining the devastating melee power of a relic power weapon with the ability to fire a powerful anti-armor laser weapon. It's pretty much a spear packing a mini Death Star laser. So yeah, this guy's arsenal is pretty goddamn insane. Now we move on to Moloc's feats. And first, as described in The Fall of Orpheus, Moloc is a veteran of countless battles, and has personally slain several renegade chapter masters, orc war bosses, corsair princes, and champions of the dark gods. So based on that, we know Moloc is not just your average Space Marine chapter master, as defeating entities such as this, like a renegade chapter master, an orc war boss, or a corsair prince, he must scale far higher than that. Later in that same codex, The Fall of Orpheus, we see Moloc and his chapter, the Minotaurs, engage the Necrons, where he fights his way through Necron Praetorian Guard and Tomb Guardians in order to reach a Necron Overlord. And this is honestly a ridiculous feat, because the Necron Praetorian Guard are some of the most elite warriors in the entire Necron hierarchy. They possess some of the finest bodies available outside of the Silent King Zarek himself, giving them incredible regeneration, advanced sensory abilities, millennias of combat experience, and weaponry that bypasses even the strongest defenses. Like for example, their phased weapons can ignore conventional armor entirely, while their ranged weaponry can unleash antimatter streams and devastating energy blasts. that few mortal beings can withstand. And still Moloc is able to cut through them. Moloc raged and slew as tirelessly as any machine warrior that rose up before him, and with a far greater cold fury, his storm shield resounding with the blows of enemy weapons, while the black spear tirelessly slashed and stabbed, punching through armored torsos and severing mechanical limbs as he went. As Moloc is doing this, the Necron Overlord is fighting a Dreadnought, who the Necron Overlord beats up pretty badly. But as he is doing so, Moloc comes up behind the Overlord and shanks it in the back with the black spear, punching it clear through his armor. But just as he does this, the ship they're fighting on rocks, knocking everyone around, giving the Overlord time to recover from Moloc's backstab. And Moloc narrowly survives the Overlord's return. By a warrior's instinct earned on 1,000 battlefields, Moloc reacted before his conscious mind detected the reaping blade falling from on high, raising his storm shield as the Dark Overlord's blade came down, the ancient device blocking a blow that would have cleaved Moloc's head in two before it finally shorted and spat, quickly coming apart under the repeated wild blows of the Necron's glittering blade. The world tilted once more and they parted, Moloc feeling the burning cold hate of the deathless creature's baleful crimson eyes as the broken skeletal figure retreated into the darkness. The master of the Minotaur's chapter himself was swept out into the void, surrounded by the bodies of his dead warriors as if caught in a whirlpool. So Moloc was able to react to and survived an encounter with the Necron Overlord, before being yeeted out into outer space due to the ship doing tricks and flips like Anakin Skywalker was driving it.
I'll try spinning, that's a good trick.
Oh yeah, 2 Star Wars references in one video.
Hello there.
This fight tells me that Moloc has the ability and skill to wound a Necron Overlord, and even for a brief period of time, openly contend with one. But this feat becomes even more significant when we discuss how strong a Necron Overlord truly is. Unlike basic Necron warriors, Overlords retain much of their original personality, intelligence, and nobility after biotransference, allowing them to command some of the most advanced bodies and technology in the Necron Empire. Physically, their living metal body can regenerate from catastrophic damage, ignore conventional attacks through their phase technology, and possesses the strength to tear apart heavily armored opponents with ease. Their minds operate at incredible speeds, allowing them to process battlefield information almost instantly. On top of that, their weaponry is among the most advanced in the galaxy. They have warp scythes and void scythes that can slice through almost any material in the galaxy. Beyond that, their resurrection orbs can restore fallen Necrons to the battle, and their mind shackle scarabs can even hijack the minds of enemy warriors. So yeah, definitely not too shabby for Mr. Moloc straight out of the gate. I will say though that Necron Overlords definitely vary in strength and power, and each of them scales very differently based on their gear, abilities, and overall prowess. But I would say the standard Necron Overlord probably fits in somewhere in the enhanced tier. So Moloc being able to contend with an enhanced opponent already shows that he's a pretty strong Space Marine Chapter Master. Moloc also fought and defeated a demon-possessed bodyguard during the Badab War, and after defeating him, he even dealt a mortal wound to Layak, the Dark Apostle, as seen in Imperial Armor Volume 10, Part 2, the Badab War. Fighting his way into the depths of the Basilica Vaults, it was Asterion Moloc who slaughtered the foul, Layak's demon-possessed bodyguard, and struck a mortal blow to their hulking, toad-like master. But before the fatal stroke could be dealt to the Dark Apostle, he fled back into the warp by his black arts. So although there isn't really a lot of context to this fight, we know that A. Moloc defeated a demon-possessed Space Marine, who usually have a vast array of mutations and physical enhancements that make them quite stronger than your average Space Marine, and B. he also dealt a fatal stroke to a Dark Apostle. Now all Dark Apostles aren't Psychers, but they do have blessings from the Ruinous Pantheon that also give them enhancements, such as Witch Sight, Words of Power, or other such gifts. So once again, we see that Moloc is able to contend with and actually defeat some quite powerful Chaos characters. Outside of this fight, Moloc has fought across hundreds of different campaigns, including the Badab War, the Hexari coup of Terra, and conflicts across the Sabatine worlds and the Damocles Gulf. Pretty much wherever the Minotaurs are deployed, Moloc is found always in the thick of the fighting, leading from the front and personally taking part in the destruction of the Emperor's enemies. But unfortunately, that is about it when it comes to true feats we see from Moloc on page. However, as you all probably know, there is one specific statement that makes Moloc appear far stronger than most people would expect. This comes from a Custodian shield captain by the name of Valerian, from the book Watchers of the Throne, A Regent's Shadow. Now let me set the stage for this statement because context is incredibly important. While Rabute Guilliman is away on the Indominus Crusade, a faction of former High Lords of Terra attempts to reclaim their absolute power after being removed by Guilliman. To accomplish this, they summon their personal attack dogs, the Minotaur's chapter. During the tense ceasefire that follows, Alia, a Sisters of Silence, decides to take matters into her own hands and attacks the High Lords guarded by the Minotaurs. In response, Trajan Valorous sends Valerian and his fellow Custodes after her. Chaos erupts, battle is joined, and as it turns out, the Master of Assassins has secretly been working with Trajan the entire time, which results in Imperium assassins eliminating the renegade High Lords. But that's besides the point, because at the conclusion of these shenanigans, Valerian comes face to face with Asterion Moloc. And this is where we get the infamous statement you've all heard. I watched him approach, trying to ascertain some weakness, some flaw that I could use against him. I detected nothing. He may as well have been an automaton, a battle creation forged in some dark and forgotten laboratory and sent into the world of the living. Who could have halted such a monster? Valoris in all probability, Guilliman without a doubt. Beyond that, and as for myself, I felt no certainty. No further, I warned again, tensing to strike. The moment he took a step onto the podium stairs, I would move. To this day, I do not know what would have happened if he had done so. I suffer neither from doubt nor from pride, and so can only speculate from the evidence I had before me. Perhaps I would have found a way. I had felled some of the greatest warriors of the enemy in my time, including many who most certainly had possessed the power to best me. But with Moloc, I can't be sure. So a shield captain of the Adeptus Custodes, one of the Golden Warriors personally created by the Emperor, is genuinely unsure if he could defeat Asterion Moloc in single combat. And to be even more specific, Valerian is not just some average custodian. He is the hero of the Lion's Gate, has fought through waves and waves of elite Black Legion forces, and has even helped slay a powerful bloodthirster. So no, Valerian is not just some random custodian. And to really drive that point in, the bloodthirster he did defeat was not your simple greater demon either. As during the events of the Watchers of the Throne, the Emperor's Legion, Valerian describes the creature like this. It was truly gigantic, far greater than any foe I have engaged before or since. It reared high into the blood-rain storm, its wings lashing like the sails of some ancient galleon. Its cloven hooves sunk deep into the rockcrete with every step, breaking the earth into fresh plumes of flame. Its movements were horrific, bleeding with the same power a titan has, but bound up in sinew and gristle and bone. Its axe alone was the size of a dreadnought chassis, and as the blade whistled through the air, it left a trail of fire in its wake. Yeah, so this bloodthirster was literally described as possessing physical strength comparable to a titan. And not only that, it's also noted a short moment later that every swing of its axe carried enough force to level a fortress. It was colossal, a soul crucible fueled by veins of molten lead and driven by a core of inextinguishable venom. Our blades barely scratched its flesh. Our blows barely halted its heavy rampage. Every pendulous swing of that axe was more lethal, unleashing forces capable of leveling whole fortresses, and against which our armor was as potent as parchment. If we were to have any chance to end it, we would need to dare the impossible. And yet Valerian, alongside Grey Knights and the Sisters of Silence, is able to bring this monster down. Even crazier during their fight, Valerian is able to personally block attacks from this bloodthirster. Attacks that, as I just described, are enough to destroy a fortress and rival the strength of a titan. I jabbed another deep wound into its vein thigh before darting away from the swing of the axe. As the head screamed past me, I twisted and turned, slamming Gnosis down on the great iron shaft of the weapon. The impact was horrific, drawing my arms to the bone and nearly shattering them. But my blade broke through its tortured mass, severing the shaft in two and showering me with flying splinters. So yeah, Valerian is pretty cracked himself. He is a Custodes who can perceive things in microseconds, fight for extended periods of time against demons that are described as numbering beyond comprehension, deflect bullets and las bolts in midair, and punch clean through demon flesh. When I say he's one of the strongest Custodes in the current era, I'm not kidding. And this dude still genuinely looked at Moloc and could not say with certainty that he could beat him. But that is about it in terms of feats and statements for Asterion Moloc. At least he's got more going for him than Tyberos, right guys? Well, I hope so at least. Now that we've covered Moloc's abilities, weapons, and feats, we can finally move on to the part everyone's been waiting for, scaling him against the rest of the 40k universe. Yep, it's everyone's favorite part of the video, revealing a Chaos Power Pyramid. And this time around, we're going to be using a few different tiers, just to dial things in a little bit better. For this video, we'll be using 7 tiers. And yes, before anyone asks, we will not be factoring in the planetary, cosmic, or god tiers. I know some of y'all love your giant murdering bull, but let's calm the hell down, he's not that powerful. Now let's lay out the tiers we're going to be using in today's video. Our first new tier is the Captain tier, and this is where you find your standard elite warriors, who are clearly above the rank and file super soldiers that dominate the 40k universe. But they aren't powerful enough to make it to the Chapter Master tier. Here we find your typical Space Marine captains, along with Eldari autarchs and veteran Chaos champions. After that comes the Chapter Master tier, where we find the upper ceiling of standard mortal beings. These are your standard Space Marine Chapter Masters, Orc War Bosses, and Eldar Exarchs. After that, for the purposes of this video, and in order to be as in-depth as possible, I've included 3 enhanced tiers. Because man, oh man, there are so many characters that can fit into the enhanced level. First, we have the low enhanced tier, which includes warriors who push far beyond the standard Astartes limitations. These are essentially beings who can fight and defeat a basic standard Custodes. So at the bottom of the low enhanced tier, we obviously have your standard basic Adeptus Custodian. Next is the Vizarch, one of the champions of Euphrain and the Inari. And finally, at the top of the low enhanced tier is the Swarmlord. Yes, Tyranid fans, yes, he falls into the low enhanced tier. If you haven't watched my fraud video on him, go check it out, because really, the Swarmlord he's just kind of a bum. After that, we have the mid-enhanced tier, where we find Lilith Hesprax, the Queen of Knives, and the stronger chapter masters of the Imperium, like Marneus Calgar, Lord of Ultramar. Finally, we have our third enhanced tier, the high enhanced tier, where we find the greatest mortal champions of the galaxy, like Karn the Betrayer, and Captain General of the Custodes, Trajan Valoris. On a side note, I would put Constantine Valdor at the very top of the high enhanced tier, but he honestly might slide in to the low Primarch tier, due simply to his combat ability, as he has multiple statements placing his combat skill on the same level as the Primarchs. But since I don't want to debate that in today's video, I'm just not going to include him on my power pyramid. Moving on after that is the Primarch tier, where we find most base Primarchs, like Sanguinius the Lion or Horus, as well as most avatars of Cain, and the strongest name-greater demons, like Skarbrand, Kubanda, or Shalaxi Hellbane. Then finally, at the very top, we have the Beyond Primarch tier, where we find beings whose power exceeds even the base Primarchs. This includes entities like the Demon Primarchs or Catan Shards. So those are the tiers we're going to be using in today's video. And now that we've established them, it's time to finally figure out where Moloc sits. To briefly summarize his feats, he has slain Renegade Chapter Masters, Orc War Bosses, Corsair Princes, Chaos Champions, Necron Praetorians, and even briefly fought a Necron Overlord. And although the fight was brief, Moloc was able to react to and block the Necron's attacks. Beyond that, Moloc has fought across numerous campaigns and should be a veteran of hundreds of battles. And to top it all off, of course, we have the infamous scaling statement from Valerian, a Custoidan shield captain, who was uncertain he could beat Moloc in a straight up fight. Of all these feats and statements, that is the biggest factor of them all. Because as we discussed earlier, Valerian is a pretty damn strong Custodes. And so the idea that a Custodian of his caliber took one look at Moloc and couldn't determine if he would win is absolutely insane. However, all of this comes down to one question. How much validity should we actually give Valerian's statement? Well, when you actually think about it, Valerian is a Custodes shield captain, and this statement comes directly from his perspective as Moloc approaches. So unless he's really confused or just straight up lying, there's no reason to really doubt what he's saying, since it's literally an eternal monologue. Additionally, moments earlier, Valerian had just fought and defeated a Primaris Space Marine, and the text makes it clear that he was genuinely interested in testing himself against this new breed of warriors, as he thinks he was fast, he was powerful. On another day, I might have savored the contest a little more, aiming to discover more of this new breed of warrior, teasing out every scrap of knowledge in order to bring my own capability closer to perfection. So Valerian was not underestimating his opponents, which means yes, there's no reason to assume that he would suddenly be dishonest or exaggerating when he encounters Moloc. This is also supported by the fact that Custodians are not ordinary warriors. Their enhanced perception allows them to process information at speeds far beyond normal humans or even space marines, allowing them to analyze their opponent's moves and weaknesses almost instantly. When Valerian says he detected no weaknesses in Moloc, you know, that really does carry some weight, as he specifically states, who could have halted such a monster? Valoris in all probability, Guilliman without a doubt. Beyond that, and as for myself, I felt no certainty. Now of course Moloc is not only impressive because of this one statement, he has also defeated other powerful opponents, including Chapter Masters, Corsair Princes, Orc War Bosses, Chaos Champions, Necron Praetorians, and even survived an encounter with a Necron Overlord. Those are not minor achievements by any margin, and they further support the idea that Moloc exists far beyond an average Space Marine. So starting things off, I think Moloc clearly scales beyond the standard captain and chapter master tier. He has already defeated multiple beings who sit within that category, and his durability, equipment, combat experience, and skill push him firmly into the conversation for the enhanced tiers. And oh boy, oh my, you're probably thinking to yourself, there is definitely no way in hell there is enough evidence to put Moloc over the beings found here, like a basic Custodian, the Vizarch, or even the Swarmlord. Well folks, well, what if I told you there was? Yes, there is enough evidence. First off, starting with the Custodian, I think Moloc has enough feats and statements, or at least statement, to push him over your standard golden banana boy. The biggest reason is of course the Valerian statement. Valerian is a shield captain, which already ranks above a standard Custodian. And since shield captains gain their rank through experience and skill, we can easily make the assumption that Valerian is stronger than a basic Custodian. And therefore, we can comfortably place Moloc above a standard basic Custodian. Next up is the Vizarch. And while the Vizarch is an exceptional duelist and one of the deadliest Eldari warriors alive, I don't think his overall feats reach the same level as Moloc. The Valerian statement alone gives Moloc a stronger scaling chain than anything the Vizarch has ever demonstrated. I just think the Minotaur's chapter master edges him out in overall martial prowess. And finally we arrive at the Swarmlord, who gatekeeps the end of the low enhanced tier. And as terrifying as the Swarmlord is, his track record against elite Space Marines is honestly pretty goddamn rough. It has consistently struggled against chapter masters like Calgar or Dante, and has even been defeated by Custodes shield captain in the book Duty Unto Death, with the novel outright stating they were evenly matched, opposites mirrors. one the pinnacle of human genetic mastery, the other a crescendo of accelerated hyperevolution. One was golden, the other base. So this text makes it pretty clear that a Swarm Lord is equivalent to a Custodi shield captain. And when we see it lose to Calgar in the 5th and 6th edition Tyranid codexes, in their first duel, Calgar appears to only lose because the Swarm Lord wasn't fighting alone. Calgar would have to face the Swarm Lord and its bodyguard alone. Calgar fought like a hero of legend, but there were simply too many foes and he was finally laid low, his body rent and torn. Calgar's last strength was expended in mortal combat with the Swarm Lord itself, and the Hive Tyrant towered over the Space Marine, blades raised to deliver the killing blow. So yeah, the implication of this fight is that Calgar was overwhelmed by both the Swarm Lord and its Tyranid guard, not simply the Swarm Lord. When they finally meet again for a rematch, this time around there are no Tyranid guard to aid the Swarm Lord, and their fight ends up very differently, as seen in the 6th edition Tyranid Codex. In a replay of history, Marnea's Calgar faced none other than the Swarm Lord, a reincarnation of the same beast that had laid him low on Macragge. This time, however, it would be Calgar who emerged triumphant, slaying the beast in an epic duel. So Calgar defeats the Swarm Lord in a straight-up rematch, and Moloc, who you know is also a chapter master, is at the very least somewhat comparable to Calgar, implying that he could potentially do the same. This is further backed up by Moloc's direct scaling to Custodi shield captain, who according to Duty Unto Death are relative to a Swarm Lord. And in that book, the shield captain outright defeats the Swarm Lord in a one-on-one fight. So hold on to your butts, if a random shield captain could defeat a Swarm Lord, then you can make the assumption that Valerian would do the same, and if Valerian didn't think he could beat Moloc, then we can make the scaling conclusion that Asterion Moloc would also defeat the Swarm Lord, although it would probably be a much closer fight. I know that sounded like the most mental gymnastics you've ever heard in your life, but hey, it's true fellas, it's true. What else do you want me to do with these scaling statements? So taking all of that together, I think the evidence just points in one direction. And yes, I know the Nid fans are going to cry out all at once. Asterion Moloc, the chapter master of the Minotaurs, scales above the Swarm Lord in the low enhanced tier. Sorry Fraud Lord, but the evidence is just too much at this point. This brings us to the next level, the mid enhanced tier. And let's start with Lilith Hesperax, the Queen of Knives. Lilith is one of the most infamous warriors in the entire 40k setting. She has slain Hive Tyrants, Orc War Bosses, and some of the greatest champions to enter the arenas of the Dark City. Within Common Ra, she is considered the greatest gladiator of her age, a warrior whose speed, precision, and skill are almost unmatched. However though, when you really start scaling her against the other high tier opponents in the enhanced tiers, Lilith does have some notable weaknesses. Her biggest strength is also her biggest limitation. She is a pure duelist. She relies almost entirely on her speed and skill rather than durability or overwhelming power. One example of this comes from the 7th edition Dark Eldar Codex, where Lilith fought a Space Marine named Custoidan for 6 hours. Now granted, this was a champion from the Iron Knights chapter, and he does have some very impressive feats for himself, such as winning 2 of 3 Feasts of Blades, and even standing his own for quite some time against 12 Incubi and a Dark Eldar Archon, although he was ultimately defeated and captured, which led him to fighting Lilith in the first place. Now although Lilith did emerge victorious in their duel, the fight was far from effortless, as the Space Marine did manage to wound her, leaving a significant blow on her midriff. Another example of this comes from her own novel, Lilith, Queen of Knives, where she nearly suffers a devastating defeat against an unnamed Space Marine. The stern, unyielding expression of whoever that Space Marine had been, Lilith never had bothered to get a name, who had came within a whisper of collapsing her chest with a blow from his massive, empowered fist. It had been his first blow of their fight, and it had been a good one, but it also had been his last. Lilith had dismantled his armor with her knives as skillfully as a homunculus might dissect a cadaver, digging the points into crevices, shattering bolts, cutting away plates, and slicing through cabling. So here again, she does emerge victorious, but due to her lack of armor, she almost dies again. Now to be clear, these aren't anti-feats that make Lilith weak. She is still one of the most skilled combatants in the entire galaxy. But when you compare her to someone like, say, I don't know, Asterion Moloc, the matchup really does become complicated. Lilith's biggest advantage is speed and skill. If she gets inside her opponent's defenses, very few beings can match her ability to dismantle them. However, against Moloc, she runs into a major problem: the reality of actually putting him down. The Queen of Knives fights with incredible lethal but relatively fragile weapons, and she literally wears almost no armor herself. She's designed to dodge and avoid attacks, not absorb them. Moloc, on the other hand, is almost the complete opposite. He's a heavily augmented space marine who wears Artificer Terminator armor, carries a storm shield, and wields the Black Spear that has, remember, a built-in mini Death Star that can penetrate tank armor. This just seems like a mismatch to me, as well as to the other beings in the low mid-enhanced tier. Now, I will admit, a major issue with scaling Lilith is that sometimes, well, to put it pretty simply, she likes to fuck around and allows her duels to extend far past they usually would, just for the sake of entertainment. For example, we see this in Gathering Storm Part 2. The crowd screamed in approval, as with much of Dark Elder society. This too was duplicity. Lady Hesperax had purposely left an opening and allowed her adversary's blade to land in order to draw the audience further in. Lilith was in no hurry to end the duel, for it would not to disappoint her patron, Astrobel Vect. There's only been a few occasions where we've actually seen her fight all out, or at least we know that she went all out. There's also the issue that she has not really fought a lot of notable characters. Sure, she's defeated Hive Tyrants and other champions, but those beings aren't exactly the strongest in the 40k universe. And sure, she has defeated Hellbrick, but that happened completely off screen, and Hellbrick isn't one of the top 15, top 20, or even top 25 strongest Space Marines in the setting. Even further, it is stated that if she fought Lucius the Eternal, it would be the greatest duel ever seen in the Dark City, implying that Lucius would be the greatest adversary she had ever faced in the gladiatorial arenas. So it really pains me to do this, but I think the matchup, as well as just the straight up feats and scaling, put Asterion Moloc over Lilith Hesperax, as well as the other beings found in the low enhanced tier. This is going to be one controversial placement, and if you think I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments with a solid, thorough argument with evidence, and who knows, you may even convince me. But for now, I'm going to place Asterion Moloc over Lilith Hesperax, the character benchmark of the low mid-enhanced tier. And since he scales over her, the next question becomes, how does he compare to the other side of the mid-enhanced tier? And this is where we come to Marneus Calgar, the chapter master of the Ultramarines, the champion of the Matt Ward era. And this is where Moloc faces his toughest opponent, as Calgar has one of the strongest feat lists of any Space Marine in the entire setting. He has personally fought and defeated the Swarmlord, Angraf the Unbound, Makar the Reborn, the Avatar of Cain, and even stood against Abaddon the Despoiler, the War Master of Chaos, and although he did lose, he wasn't easily defeated, and that was even before he crossed the Rubicon Primaris. On the other side, Moloc has the Valyrian Statement, incredible war gear, extensive cybernetic enhancements, and has defeated other great foes. However, though, when comparing their overall bodies of work, I think Calgar simply still has the edge. Remember folks, during the fall of Cadia, Abaddon fought a Custodes Blade champion, and not only did he defeat him, but he one-shot him with Dracnian. Compare that to Calgar's fight against Abaddon in Imperium Nihilus Vigilus Ablaze. Calgar does lose, but it's far from being one-shot, as he even manages to wound the War Master before finally going down. So yes, Moloc still has the Valyrian Statement, but that statement isn't a confirmed yes. So via scaling, Calgar is just simply better than Asterion Moloc. So while yes, I think this fight would be incredibly close, and Moloc is absolutely within the same conversation as the greatest Space Marines alive, I think he ultimately falls short of Marneus Calgar and the other powerful chapter masters like him, and so I think Moloc sits firmly in the middle of the mid-enhanced tier. And I know, a lot of people are probably going to argue this scaling, but come on now, facts are facts, people. But I do want to acknowledge that a large portion of this scaling comes from the infamous Valyrian Statement. If you disagree with Moloc's placement, that is most likely going to be the area where you disagree. Because without that statement, Moloc's feats are still impressive, yes, but he becomes much harder to separate from other elite chapter masters. However, like I said, facts are facts. Valerian, a Custoidan shield captain, took one look at Moloc, analyzed him, searched for weaknesses, and genuinely cannot say with certainty that he would win in a straight up 1v1 fight. His eternal monologue isn't one of fear or exaggeration. It is an honest assessment of the final threat in front of him. Valerian even states that Guilliman would defeat Moloc without a doubt, and that Valoris likely could as well. But beyond those figures, even he wasn't confident in the outcome. I know, I'm repeating myself over and over again, but I'm just really trying to drive that point home. So while Moloc may not have the extensive list of feats like someone like Calgar, and while I don't think he quite reaches the highest levels of the setting, the combination of his own feats, his war gear, his battle history, and most importantly, the Valerian statement, pushes him comfortably beyond the chapter master and low enhanced tiers, slotting him firmly into the mid of the mid enhanced tier. And with that, we have finished yet another infamous Space Marine ranking. We had Tyberos slotted into the top of the low chapter master tier, and now Moloc makes it all the way to the middle of the mid-enhanced tier. Pretty crazy stuff, fellas, right? Am I right? Who should we do next? Armin, Karn, or maybe even Abaddon himself? Maybe we could even do the Legion of the Damned, or Belisarius' Call. Or hell, maybe Lilith Hesperax deserves a second look. Let me know down in the comments. I've been having a ton of fun doing the research and writing for this video, especially with the massive Discord debates coming afterwards. So let me know down in the comments who you want to see next. As always, a huge shout out to my Patreon and YouTube members. Diomedes XX2, Impossible Paul, Tyler Pick 7, Musty, Keydri, Seth Capizilla, Lag, Simply Pain 66, Caleb White, Dink Goldberry, Jack Roar, Morally Bankrupt 1461, Ritter S, Anish Chatterjee, and Luke Bryce. I appreciate you guys a ton. Here is a special message from Gizmo, my beloved little kitty cat. What do you think about Asterion Moloc? Do you think he's a loser? How many, do you think he's a Primarch? You heard it from him. Everyone drop a cat emoji or say meow in the comments and I'll give Gizmo 1,000,000 cat toys. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. As always, you guys really mean the world to me. I do all the research and writing and all the autistic stuff that comes with these videos solely for you guys, just to make sure these videos are as correct as possible and just as authentic as the 40k universe can make them. But yeah, stay milked, fellas. You'll see me real soon.